To a topic of sliding that never gets talked about. I'm joined by Sean Hollander. Thank you. I just roped him into this, so he doesn't really want to be doing this. But I'm going to ask him a bunch of questions, and then you're going to be the expert and tell us how this works. Yes. And then so here's a sled. We're so lucky to have found a sled here at the finish because most athletes would never let someone come look at their sled, right?
Yeah, no, these are like our pride and joy. We don't let other countries see them, and yeah, we set them up ourselves.
So this is a treat that we get to have a sled. So tell us about steels really quick. Let me say what I know about them, and then I want you to fill in like what's been updated since I've been sliding. So every country makes their steels differently. Steels are like half of the game in sliding, right?
Yeah, steels are everything. I mean, it's the first point of contact to the ice, so it's where you can change how much control you have, how fast you're gonna go, all that stuff.
And it's okay. So how do you change that? Like, what does that mean? So we can see they're at an angle. If you can't tell on camera, they're not just flat. Like it's not like skis where you're just flat. It's almost like you're in pizza with skis. So they're on an inside angle. So what is the angle? How do you choose this angle, or what do angles mean?
Okay, so the steels basically, we only ride about like 1 inch of the steel at a time. So
what does that mean?
The steel actually isn't flat. There is a slight bow to it. So at any given time, we're only riding about this much of the steel and then probably just this top like 5 millimeters. And so we have a very small contact with the ice, and we want to control how much of that we have. And we can actually put on the outside or the inside small strips of tape. And if we put them on the outside, it angles the steel down. You have less control, but you can go a little faster. And if you put them on the inside, it angles the steel up a little bit, and the runners dig in more to the ice, so you have more control. And the other thing that we can do is we can actually sharpen these steels, again, with this edge right here that's only a couple millimeters. If you round that, the steel will go faster across the ice, but also it's like a little battle because then you have less control. But if you sharpen them, it can dig into the ice more, and you have more drivability, and everything's just more secure.
I just feel like luge is already so complicated. Like, just to get down this track is hard enough. And then this just brings in a whole thing of technology. So, like, do you know, like, what makes a steel different than another steel? Is it, like, different, like, material? Or, like if we were to have an American steel versus a German steel or any other country, like, what could be so different?
I mean, there's so much that goes into it. There can be different, like, types of steel, different hardens of steel, and all of that. We have a bunch of different materials, and we test them. And
because like certain materials are faster than others.
Yeah, I mean, certain materials are faster than others, and then that can be different if it's warm, if it's cold. Like some steels go faster on cold ice, some steels go faster on soft ice, and then there's the whole battle of if it's sharper or if it's duller. Which setup is better for which ice conditions. So there's like so many variables that go into it on every given weekend.
Where do you store all this information? Like, is this just in your brain, or do you have like a spreadsheet for this?
A lot of it's in your brain, and then we try and write down as much as you can, but
sounds like a headache.
It's an ever-evolving pool of information.
Wow. Okay. So now you know when you're watching these races that there was so many calculations that went into just getting the steels correct. And I grabbed this little guy from inside of our control room. And do you guys still use these, like to test your parallel?
Sometimes we have a little fancier one with a little dial, and it's a little more accurate. But this is the tried and true method.
Okay. So what they did here, can you hold this for me and I'll explain? Or do you want to explain?
I'll have you explain.
Okay. So parallel is a big part of the sport. Parallel is, well, what is parallel? You should tell me.
Okay. I'll switch real quick.
Yeah, you do this. Okay.
So parallel is how parallel each steel is to each other, and that's also how much control your drives are going to do. So what we mostly measure is parallel in between the bridges, and what the average athlete runs is somewhere between 1 and 2 millimeters towed in or towed out.
He said millimeters, guys. Like it's like
very fine measurements. And yeah, so some bridges let you adjust it. Sometimes you have to add shims into the coupons to give or change, put it on the outside or the inside, and that brings in the steel a little bit or a little out.
Which means they'll put in like these really thin metal sheets that will go inside this box, which then push it in and out. So that's like a whole other thing that you're testing. You're like, should I put shims in here? Should I? So it's so many things. So then how does this ruler? So they start measuring it.
So yeah, it's something like you bring it like this, and you try and line it up. Usually there's a notch so you can keep it there, and then you measure from there to there, and it's really only like 1 or 2 millimeters difference.
But you're eyeing pretty much how much it changed. And so like back in the day when they were sliding, like this is how you would just eye it. Like it's kind of crazy to think like a sport time to the thousandth of a second, and like they used to hand make, a lot of countries still do hand make their sleds. Some countries work with car manufacturers to make them. But anyways, there's so many pieces to this. Is there anything else you want to add? Like I feel like when I was sliding, I always had so much to say about steels because there's so much we're taught about them.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much that goes into it. I mean, you can sharpen up the fronts and backs, and usually the funny thing is you can't really tell on this sled, but usually from here to here, the steel is almost completely round. So that's when you come onto a curve, when you take on, you don't want the steels to catch and dig in, and that can drive you up to the top of the curve. So we usually make these almost as round as they go. And then this is where a lot of athletes can fine tune for their own steels, is how much grip they have on the back, because that's how much your rolls do. And then, yeah, pretty much between the bridges is how much your legs are gonna do. Yeah, I mean, parallel is crazy because you're changing it 1 to 2 millimeters, but it's an insane difference on the track between like 1 degree and 2 degree. It's like with 2 degrees, you feel like you almost don't even have to drive, but with 1, you're like having to crank everything, and it's crazy for every track. You have to switch it up.
Super crazy. Okay, well, thank you for telling us all this. I'm sure there's so much more. Maybe we'll do more pieces where we talk about this. And I steel work is something that I'm just waiting to get into because that's how they manipulate this edge and make it how they want. And so anyways, Sean Hollander, you'll see in the races. Thank you so much. Is there anything else you'd like to add to this?
No, I think that covers it.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. That is steels for you. As if you didn't have a headache already watching Luge, we just gave you a bigger one on how to put these sleds